I'm Barbara Martin, as Donna introduced me, and as an 8-year veteran of Lakewood City Council and a 50-year member of the American Association of University Women, I just feel I'm very privileged to introduce this program tonight. It captures the highlights of the last 50 years of the city of Lakewood through the memories of our mayors. A few facts before we begin. Lakewood was incorporated in 1969, and it was 26 square miles at the time, and it was the east side of Jefferson County, all the way to Sheridan, which we still are there. At the time, though, it was the largest incorporation in the country with the 26 square miles. Today, the city comprises 44 square miles, almost doubling in size, and its population was approximately 93,000. Today, in 2019, the population has grown to 155,000. Tonight, we have a varied program of videotapings of former mayors, as well as a live presentation from our most recent mayors and our current mayor, Adam Paul. 8 mayors in all have served Lakewood for 50 years. Seems like there should be more than that, doesn't it? But that's there. Our first video interview will be of Jim RICHEY, our first mayor, who was instrumental in the city's incorporation. Jim was district manager of Procter & Gamble. The interview, done at the time of the city's 40th anniversary, is conducted by Bob Murphy, who was mayor at the time. Also present in the video are Linda Shaw, a former mayor, and Carl New, a councilman from Ward 5. So, enjoy.
You're the first mayor of Lakewood, and talk about the idea of forming a city back in the late 60s, how that came about.
Well, actually, the effort in 1969 was the 5th effort to incorporate eastern Jefferson County. Obviously, the first 4 failed, and the 5th one was successful, I think, for 2 basic reasons. One, there was much pride in the Jefferson County school system, and during that time, the city and county of Denver was flexing their muscles about trying to expand. There was no limitation about where they could go, and the thought of giving up the school system, I think, was a motivating factor. The second motivating factor was the fact that we had a crime situation going on where...
Was that the garage bandit?
Yeah, they called him the garage rapist.
Oh.
And anyway, the concern of the citizens, they recognized that at any one shift, there was only 1.5 sheriff patrol cars to take care of what's now Lakewood. So those 2 things, I think, were highly motivating factors in making June of '69 a successful election.
And how about the drawing of the boundaries? How did that come about?
Well, Mr. Mayor, not very sophisticated. Down in my basement, I had a ping pong table, and I took a map of eastern Jefferson County and a black felt pencil or pen, and drew the boundaries. It wasn't too complicated. You had Sheridan on the east and Hamden on the south, and I thought 32nd on the north and on the west was a little more complicated. But an interesting part of that was after having drawn the boundaries, the individual who was the head of the Wheat Ridge Incorporation called me one Saturday and asked if he could come over to my house, and I said, sure. He came over and he said, Jim, my mother lives right here around 32nd, and we've been native of Wheat Ridge for so long, would you mind redrawing that? I said, no big deal. So a new map and a new felt pencil. And
government was a little easier in those days, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, it was accepted by the judge.
Jim, one of the things that Lakewood is still known for today is the high caliber of our police department.
Yes.
And you all were involved in the early days. And what prompted the decision to require a college education for our police agents? That was pretty rare at the time.
Actually, in the summer of '69, prior to the actual election of officials, three of us got together and brainstormed the concept of creating a police department from scratch. And we agreed that we had a rare opportunity to do something very unique. And one of the things we agreed on was to try to soften the image of police vis-a-vis the citizens.
Sure.
So in considering that, we thought, well, how about education? Is that a factor? And following that path, we said that we would ask for a college degree from anybody. It's mandatory. And we'd do something different, like going on to gray slacks and blue blazers. And that we would change the nomenclature of the various individuals within the department. For example, a sergeant became an agent in charge, or an AIC. Well, some of that made a lot of sense and did well with, but much of it we had to change. For example, when an AIC from Lakewood contacted a sergeant from New York, the sergeant from New York wasn't very comfortable about who he was talking to.
Didn't get the respect they deserved. Yeah.
But anyway, the education factor has continued, and the thing I guess I would be most proud of is the development of the police department. It's a nationally recognized department. At last count, I think we had 64 agents who had become chiefs of departments around the whole United States. There was a time, I have a daughter that lives in Boulder. There was a time I could leave Lakewood and drive to Boulder and be with a chief that came from Lakewood.
Yep.
That's
that's the seed you planted has germinated to what is still one of the best police departments in the United States. Well, I know you all have wonderful stories to tell about those years in office. What are some of your favorite times from the 70s and 80s and late 60s?
Well, starting off, the morning after the election, I woke up, I guess with a hangover. It said, what? I'm mayor of a city of 100,000 people, and we have no employees, no money, no ordinances, no rolling stock.
No city hall.
Somebody's got to be kidding me.
Be careful what you wish for, huh, Jim?
But I asked for meetings about twice a week, and we would meet typically in a grade school in their cafeteria, and trying to set mature bodies onto a very small platform was not easy, but we did. And I think the enthusiasm and dedication of those original council people was something I'll never forget.
I think I heard a story about a snowstorm, Labor Day weekend snowstorm, and council people involved in the cleanup. Is that?
I think the incorporation election was like the last week in August, something like that. And on Labor Day, we had a 20-inch snowstorm, broke down limbs all over the city. And that's the city being incorporated, the citizens expected service a couple weeks later. Well, one of the council members came from the waste disposal industry, and he knew most of the people, and he kind of got them together and got them to agree to furnish their trash trucks, their hauling trucks, if we would provide the manpower to go behind them. Well, the manpower became the mayor and the city council. And one of the Wheat Ridge owners that volunteered his truck had a brand new truck. I don't know what it was, but a multi-$1,000 truck. A couple of members of council got carried away and put a limb on there that wasn't a limb, it was a trunk of a tree. And it broke the gear in this new truck.
Oh, boy.
And he wasn't too happy, really, but that was a true story of how we picked up the original limbs.
What are you most proud of? Jim, you mentioned the police department that is still one of the best in the country today. What else?
Well, I think the police department would definitely rank number one.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath that are things like the continuation of people who are really dedicated like Carl and like Linda and like you.
Thank you.
That is meaningful because you read about communities, cities that having all kinds of problems, and most of those problems, if you trace them all the way, they have to do with ethics and a feeling that an individual is bigger than what he should be, he or she.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the City Hall. The first City Hall is an interesting story in itself. I had been on the school board prior to the election of the city, and I still had some friends in the administration, and I had asked them in the summer of '69, I said, you know, you've got that old administration building at 1580 Yarrow on the market. Don't try too hard to sell that, because if I'm successful, I'd like to negotiate with you for City Hall. Well, 1580 Yarrow was on the market for $300,000 and made contact the week after the election and suggested that we get an up-to-date appraisal. The appraisal came in at $180,000 for that building. And not being satisfied, I said, you know, Lakewood represents about 40% of the bricks and mortar of Jefferson County. Why don't we take a reduction of 40%? They said, okay.
They bought it, huh?
So we're now down to, I think, 118,000. And I said, you know, there's one other problem. We don't have any money. Could we pay for that over 7 years at no interest? I said, okay.
Wow.
A few stories there with Jim RICHEY. And I should mention, this will all be on Channel 8 at some future date. So if you want to reminisce and see some of those stories. Well, our second mayor was Charles Whitlock. He served on the first city council representing Ward 2, and he was mayor from 1977 to 79. He was a CPA of the firm Whitlock and Nielsen, but he chose not to run for re-election, so he just had 2 years there. And by the way, the terms were just 2 years at the very beginning. Now they're 4. He was a CPA, he chose not to run, and then the Whitlock Recreation Center that you all know that's just north of Colfax, that has been named after him. Then our third mayor, Bill Reitler, was a real estate developer. He held office from 1979 to 1983 when Linda Shaw was elected as mayor. And our next 2 videos will be about Linda Shaw and Linda Morton. And Linda Shaw, many of you might remember in this room, I think, was our first female mayor. Following immediately was Linda Morton, who served on city council with Linda Shaw, and then she was elected mayor. Both Linda Shaw and Linda Morton, we're very proud of them because they have both served as presidents of Lakewood, Colorado's branch of American Association of University Women. This was during the early 70s.
I'd like to begin with a little bit of the early history of Lakewood and the people who served as mayor in our community. The first mayor of Lakewood was Jim RICHEY, who is affectionately known as the father of our city. He served for 4 years as mayor. Following Jim, we had Chuck Whitlock, who served a 2-year term as mayor, and he was followed by Bill Reitler, who served a 4-year term of office. I'm the 4th mayor, and unfortunately these 3 people that I have just mentioned are deceased, so they will not be joining us today, but we'd like to include a little bit about them, so I'm going to give just a little bit of information about Bill Reitler. Bill served 2 terms as mayor, so he was mayor from 1979 to 1983. During that time, terms of mayor were 2-year terms. Bill was a Lakewood native, In fact, in the then entitled Lakewood Sentinel, whenever he was elected mayor, the headline in the newspaper said, "Hometown boy makes good." Bill was a graduate of the University of Denver, and before running for mayor, he had been president of the Board of Realtors, and he had been president of the Lakewood Chamber. When Bill was elected, we had 10 people on council and 1 mayor at that time. We still do, actually. And out of that election, there were 8 new people elected to city council, as well as Bill being new to the mayor's position. So out of our group of people, we had 9 people who were newbies, and we had 2 people who were incumbents, who were serving. One of the first stories that happened right after that election is Bill, as the new mayor, felt that we should have some goals for the city of Lakewood. So Bill invited the 5 men on city council to go to the mountains to a mountain cabin that belonged to another of the city council members. And they went up there and spent a weekend, or a night, overnight, and they came up with the goals for the city of Lakewood. They were thoughtful enough to think that when they got through, they would need to share this information with the women on city council. There were 5 of us. So they assigned a man to each of the women to come back and tell us what the goals were. Well, that didn't go over too well. And the women on council got together with our newspapers. We had on the night of city council, this was going to be discussed. We had the Lakewood Sentinel, the Denver Post, and the Rocky Mountain News, all with reporters who stayed till the end of the meeting, where we were going to bring up what had happened with the men. So we told them, we the women told them why we didn't think this was right. The men were kind of shocked and astounded because they'd shared the information with us. And that's the way it went that evening. Well, we got tremendous publicity in the press. And in the Lakewood Sentinel the following week, the editorial cartoon had a treehouse. And in that treehouse were 5 men. And it said, "Boys only and no girls allowed." That particular picture became quite famous within the city council, and throughout the years it was copied, enlarged, framed, and given to Bill on several different occasions. It was all done in good feeling at that time, and we did get over that. I think the men learned a thing or two, and we proceeded with Lakewood. Probably the biggest professional accomplishment during Bill's term of office was something known as cutback management. We were short some dollars in the city at that time, and it was like, how are we going to balance the budget and provide services in Lakewood? So Bill Reitler worked with Bill Kirchhoff, our city manager, and they worked together to put together a plan where the staff was reduced by 10%. They eliminated 75 positions by attrition, and they cut $1.7 million from the 1982 budget. This particular plan ended up being given to Harvard University, where it was used as a case study for students who were taking classes there. Bill had another little slight default in that he sometimes lacked diplomacy in talking to people, and he was known for name-calling at times. So one of Bill's very first city council meeting, a resident walked in with a rope in his hand, and on the end of the rope was a live turkey. The message being to the mayor, don't act like a turkey while you're here in this office. Bill made significant progress during his term as mayor in the areas of budget and finance, and also park and street improvements.
How long had you lived in Lakewood before running for public office?
I had lived in Lakewood for 17 years. I actually came to Lakewood immediately after college. I was single, and I was hired as a Jefferson County public school teacher. So I started teaching, got married in there, started having children. However, my teaching career was cut short because in 1963, Jefferson County schools would not allow you to teach if you were pregnant. So when I had my first child, I had to end my teaching career at that point. So I stayed home for a while, and then ultimately I returned to teaching. I didn't become any way involved in Lakewood until after 1969 and the incorporation. I think I didn't even vote in that particular election because I was home being a mom at that time.
What was your occupation when you ran for public office?
I was a teacher. I was a teacher at Belmar Elementary School. I taught 6th grade and gifted education. And all of the years of my elective office, I continued in my position as a teacher.
Why did you decide to run for mayor?
I have to back up a little because I ran for city council before I ran for mayor, and the being on city council is what really led to being mayor. But as you know, Lakewood became a city in 1969. In 1972, I was one of the founders and the first president of Lakewood AAUW, American Association of University Women. I was teaching a class at that time through AAUW called Women as Agents of Change. So it sort of fed along with what I was doing that I might proceed to get involved in my community. And because the city was new and Lakewood was new, frequently I would get a call from someone in Lakewood saying, we need someone to serve on a particular committee. So I had done this committee work, and one night I go out to dinner with my friends and I say to them, I think I am thinking about running for Lakewood City Council. Immediately, these women whipped out their purses, got out their checkbooks, and wrote me checks for my campaign for City Council. So at that point, there was no turning back. So in my first campaign, many of my volunteers were members of Lakewood AAUW. We had no political experience, we just had AAUW. In my first campaign for City Council, there were 3 candidates for 2 positions. One was an incumbent, one was a bank president, and then there was me, the teacher. I was not endorsed by the chamber at that time because obviously I didn't quite fit into their group of council members and bank presidents. However, after that first term of office, I was approved by the powers that be and was then supported by the chamber in all subsequent elections.
What years did you serve as mayor?
Well, first I served on city council for 2 terms, and those were 2-year terms from 1979 to 1983. For mayor, I served 2 terms, but those were 4-year terms. So that was 1983 to 1991. So in all, I had 12 years of elected office. More interesting is I was the first woman mayor in Lakewood. When I ran for office as mayor the first time, the most frequently asked question at any public meeting where I was a candidate was, how will you do it all? How will you be mayor, have a full-time job, have a spouse, and have children? And I would pause and say, the same as the 3 men who preceded me, who were mayor, had a full-time job, a spouse, and children. At the time that I was mayor, there were only 15 women in the United States that were mayors of cities larger than 100,000 people, and I was one of those 15. Another question that came up when first elected mayor and being a woman is, what shall we call you? At the city council meetings, when someone addressed the city council, they always started with Mr. Mayor and went on and made their remarks. And they said, what are we going to call you? Do we say Mrs. Mayor? Do we say Madam Mayor? And I said, no. Why not Mayor? So I became Mayor Shaw. And I actually have people in Lakewood who still call me, that's like my first and last name, Mayor Shaw.
What were the biggest issues facing Lakewood during your time in office?
Probably the biggest one that I spent the most time on, and this is in the phrases that were appropriate in that era, but the term was metropolitan cooperation. Federico Pena was elected mayor of Denver the same year that I was elected mayor of Lakewood, and both of us had similar feelings about working together in the metropolitan community. I frequently said in my speeches at that time, you have to have a healthy Denver in order to have a healthy Lakewood. We can't have a marvelous transportation system in our city, but if you can't leave Lakewood and drive into Denver and that system continues, it doesn't do you any good. And I believed strongly that we all needed to work together. Federico formed a committee of the mayors of the 7 largest cities in the metro area. That is a precursor to a group that became later organized of mayors in the metropolitan area, and there are actually more people on it. But we had the 7 mayors of the largest cities, and we would meet together and talk about various issues.
What were your biggest challenges?
One of my challenges that was kind of interesting is Fox Hollow Golf Course. We had been actually given some land by the federal government that we could use for a golf course. So we were going along trying to develop that and get everything together. And it ended up very controversial in the city of Lakewood, and we had some very heated public meetings about that. When you would come to these meetings, you would see 2 types of people in the audience. Half of the audience would be wearing golf shirts, and the other half would have on regular clothing. So whenever people were going to come to the podium and speak, you knew which side they were on as they walked up there based on what it is they were wearing. Well, one night we had a particularly heated evening with people being very angry. The environmentalists basically were accusing us of we were going to ruin the environment and take away all the wildlife if we built that golf course, and that would not be good. So that was their particular argument. So after City Council that night, our city manager came to me and said, Linda, this has just gotten too controversial. I think we need to just not do the golf course at this time. He says, if we just let it lie for a while, people will, get over it and things will calm down. And then later we'll bring it back and bring it up again when it's not so controversial. And I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, no. I have been to enough meetings in this city and talked to enough people that I firmly believe the majority of people here want the golf course and we should proceed. And we did, and the golf course was opened. It actually opened right after my term ended, and Linda Morton was the mayor at that time that got to open it. But my name is on the plaque at the golf course if you go there and look at it.
What were your biggest accomplishments?
One that was interesting to me is that before I was in public office, the issue came before the city council of do we need to build a city hall? We had been in rented space before that. So the then mayor, Jim RICHEY, appointed a committee called the Citizens Committee on the New Municipal Center. And there were 11 of us, and we were supposed to work and decide, do we need to have a new city hall? If so, where should it be? How big should it be? And how do we pay for it? We made the recommendations to council. It took quite a bit of doing to get all of this approved, but ultimately that building was built, and I was the mayor in 1984 who got to do the ribbon cutting for the new city hall that I had served on the Citizens Committee to help design. One other thing I'd like to just add in here is that all of the mayors of Lakewood, there have been 8 of us counting the current mayor, we have all gotten along so very well and shared a common vision for Lakewood. I think one of the reasons that has happened is none of us have ever run against each other, so there were never any bad ties to, I ran against that person in the election and you didn't say very nice things about me. So when term limits went in 1983, since that time, every mayor has run the 8 years that they can be in office. They leave, a new person comes along, that person runs for 8 years, and then they're out. So I think it's been really good for Lakewood that we've had this common vision. And each of us, I feel like, have built on the accomplishments of the person before us. The person before you would do something, you would build on that and do it a little better. The next person would come along and build on that. And I think collectively, we have done a very good job for Lakewood.
What was one of the greatest opportunities you had as mayor?
Well, one opportunity I had that I hadn't planned on, that I didn't know was going to happen, is being invited to go to a small reception in Washington, D.C., and the reception was with President Ronald Reagan. During that time, as I have said, I was teaching school, and one day I'm teaching, and over the PA system that they used in those days was an announcement, "Mrs. Shaw, you have a phone call." And I said, "I can't take the phone call, I'm in class with the students." And they said, "It's the White House calling." And I said, "Okay, I'll take that phone call." So I was being invited to a reception in Washington, D.C. for people who had changed political parties while in office. Now, technically, that wasn't a big deal for me because at local government level, you don't run on a political party. So I was not elected in one party and changed to another. It doesn't work that way at the local level. But anyway, I did get to go to the reception and have a meeting with the president, and got to have my picture taken with him, and got a signed copy of To Linda Shaw from Ronald Reagan that is still sitting or standing on the wall in my office at home, and it was a very, very special event.
Where do you live now?
Well, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I have lived here in Scottsdale for 16 years. I actually followed grandchildren to Arizona after I retired. To keep me busy during my retirement years, I have spent the last 12 years on the board of directors of my homeowners association, which is Grayhawk Community Association. So it's sort of like running a small town within the Scottsdale area. It's a small town of about 10,000 people that I have been working with during the last 12 years. I would like to really thank you for including me in this very significant event, the 50th anniversary of the city of Lakewood. Thank you.
We're going to continue with Linda Morton, and she too is out of town, and you'll enjoy what she has to say. And you'll be able to see why we were so proud of these two women here in our Lakewood branch. They're fantastic.
How did you become involved with the city of Lakewood?
Probably in two ways. I was a young mother that moved into Lakewood, and in an attempt to make friends and get involved, I joined the American Association of University Women, and that was at a time when Lakewood was considering incorporating. So I was involved in the incorporation movement. And then secondly, my husband and I moved to Green Mountain, and we moved at a time when the neighborhood was strongly, was very much wanting open space preserved on Green Mountain. And I got involved in that effort and was on the board of our homeowners association. And the next thing I knew, I was running for city council. It wasn't a long planned out route.
What made you decide to go into civic, to do the civic duty to go into city service?
I grew up in a family that really valued it. So that part wasn't difficult, but there was no planned progression that got me there.
So you started out with on city council, correct? Mm-hmm. And when did you serve on city council?
I served on city council from 81 to 91, and I was able to do that because before our charter was adopted, I had a 2-year term, and after that, 4-year term limits were in place. So I had a 2-year and 2 4-year terms on city council, and then 2 4-year terms as mayor. So that's a lot of city council meetings.
And what years were you mayor?
91 to 99.
Okay. And what role did you play in the development of Lakewood?
I would say the two pieces of that I'm the most proud of, and it's, you know, you're always a part of a team. It's not anybody just doing it, but one was in the preservation of Green Mountain. And every time I drive down C470 and all, I go, oh, that worked, you know, because there was a plan to develop it to the top of the mountain, and it just would have been lost for forever. The second, probably most influential piece in the development of Lakewood was being a part of the transition of Villa Italia, frankly, going downhill, and then the new shopping center, Belmar, coming to fruition. And I would have to say Mayor Steve Burkholder, who followed me, really was the champion of the new shopping center.
Who are some of your contemporaries and peers at the city when you were here?
Oh, in 18 years, there were a lot of them. Some on staff at the City of Lakewood, such as Mike Rock, great city manager, and city council and mayors like Linda Shaw, who I considered really a mentor. It certainly introduced me also to some of the previous people like Betty Miller, Bill Reitler, Ed Watson. Some fantastic people have served in the city.
What do you want to be remembered for in terms of your contributions to the city?
I think the city really went from a city that was developing from its baby stages into the bigger arena of Denver Metro leadership issues. I just mentioned I served as chairman of Dr. COG, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, but also was the founding chairman of the Metro Mayor's Caucus. And that caucus has really worked together as a team to get a number of things from mass transit to air quality issues to housing issues across the metro area. Through all of that, and because of a lot of other mayors, Lakewood really has become known as having a very strong metro-wide leadership role.
So what did you do after your work for the city?
I have done some consulting work, largely in the arena of community organizing and working with people that have projects in cities. I'm really not in the city of Lakewood, and a lot around transportation issues, but have done some of that facilitation work. We both happily and sadly moved from the city of Lakewood about 6 years ago to Roxborough Park. So I miss it, and yet we're having a kind of a new adventure in our life now.
What was the best part about working for the city?
Good people, really, really good professional people in the city of Lakewood. It's been that way for a long time, and as I see new people that are on board, I know that that standard has been upheld. And Lakewood really has a good reputation metro-wide, because that's what I've been doing more of recently in terms of boards and commissions and that type of thing. And Lakewood pretty much stands out in people's minds as one of the most progressive cities, I would say, in the state, actually.
When you look at when you started on city council, how Lakewood was then to how it is now, what are your thoughts?
It's just become, well, when I first started working in Lakewood, and I was teaching at Stein Elementary here too, Lakewood still seemed in the country, and it didn't seem like the cohesive city that it is now. And again, I'm talking over a whole bunch of years, but I think the next transition of Lakewood is going to happen as the West Corridor opens up. because it's going to change housing in some areas of the city. It's going to allow people to get into downtown Denver so much easier and back out. I think it's going to link us with our central city. So we've really come of age over time. And I also think that a real standard has been put out there for folks that can become leaders in the city of Lakewood. We don't have, well, I just think we keep a very high standard, and I hope that's always true.
Thank you for your attention, and now we come to the live part of the program. I invite the three mayors to please come up. Steve Burkholder is over here in the dark jacket, and former mayor Bob Murphy, another former mayor, and then our present mayor, Adam Paul. Yeah, I'm sitting. I'll be asking them some questions, and which, of course, they will answer, and and then when we're finished, we'll open it up for a Q&A, so you can, if your question isn't answered by them now, you may certainly ask it later. I do want you to know that these two former mayors and current mayor have served a total of 52 years with the city of Lakewood. That's a lot of meetings and wonderful service. All of them have served on Lakewood City Council first, and in addition, Bob Murphy served 5 years on the Planning Commission before that. As mayor, Steve Burkholder served from '99 to 2007, Bob Murphy from 2007 to 2015, and Adam Paul from 2015 to the present. I'm going to start with Steve, and I'm going to have a triple question, and that should work, hopefully. Try it again. There. Okay, good. How long had you lived in Lakewood before running for public office, and what was your occupation when you ran for office, and what's your occupation now?
Moved here in 1963. Ann and I got married in 1964, so I guess do the math. How many years would that be? My occupation, I was in the wholesale business for a while, and then I went into the consulting business. And after I left office, I continued in the consulting business, retired in 2011 when I was 70 years old.
So I'd lived in Lakewood for 16 years. When I first ran for city council, and as Barb said, I had been on the planning commission for 5 years prior to that. Second question, what was I?
What was your occupation?
I owned a small business, a food brokerage firm at that time with a partner.
And what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm the state director for AARP Colorado. So I have, as I told a couple people earlier this evening, I went from 144,000 constituents to 684,000 constituents. The difference perhaps being that my current constituents actually pay membership dues, unlike all of you, to be residents. So they, as they should, let me know when something's on their mind. That's a good thing.
And they're trying to get me to start paying dues too, so I think it's a little bit early.
We find you.
We find you. So I was in Lakewood 29 years, so I ran when I was 29 years old, and Lakewood's been my hometown my whole life. So this is where I was born and raised, and I have a small business that does executive transportation, and I'm still in business, and that's my current job besides being mayor.
Great. And you can hang on to the microphone because this one's for you. Why did you decide to run for mayor?
Yeah, so having grown up in this community and coming from a long line of Lutheran pastors, and my mother was a teacher, so my dad was a pastor, my mom was a teacher, there was this inherent kind of need in me to serve, to continue the tradition of serving people. But church politics are way worse than these kind of politics. So it didn't lend itself conducive, and I got involved at my local water board. So I started serving on the Green Mountain Water and Sanitation District Board of Directors. I did that for 6 years, and I really realized how important local government was and is, and the opportunity to serve and really serve on a level where people can get things done. And so I did that, and then there was an opening on city council, served for 8 years, and then came into this role.
So kind of a two-part answer. I first got involved in local government eventually on the planning commission, not surprisingly because of a land use dispute in my neighborhood. And I came to learn through almost 22 years of public service that that's pretty common. People like me all of a sudden become aware and interested in their local government when something is threatening to happen next door to you, right? And so that's kind of my story. And that's 1994, if I remember right. And then I ran for city council 1999 and eventually mayor in 2007. And I made that decision because I just thought that after all those years on the planning commission and city council, I was as well prepared as anyone had been to perhaps become mayor, and I wanted to do it. Best thing I ever did.
What Bob didn't tell you is we twisted his arm. Anyway, no, Bob did a great job when he was mayor pro tem. Basically, I was on city council, and with my background in the wholesale business, I had the advantage of visiting many shopping centers throughout the U.S., and we could see the fact that Billa was in big trouble with 40% occupancy. And so about a year before it was time to announce for mayor, I decided that maybe I could offer something, and so that's when I decided to run for mayor and talked with a few people around here. And so I felt that that was one of the major issues facing the city of Lakewood was what can we do about Villa Italia? And so that's was one of the key reasons why I decided to run.
What were the biggest issues? Now, what were the biggest issues facing Lakewood during your time in office? And this might be the same. What were your biggest challenges?
Well, you know, Lakewood, let's put it in perspective. In 1999, the city of Lakewood was going through a huge era of change. Keep in mind, it was the turn of the century. And one of our biggest things was infrastructure. That was one. We were having dead or dying shopping areas, infrastructure challenges. We also were having societal changes too. The community was changing a great deal. We felt a real strong need for reaching out to the community and involving the citizens, involving the business community, creating those partnerships that were necessary between government, community, and the business community. But there was really a big one too that a lot of people didn't realize, but the council and myself and staff certainly realized there were some real physical challenges too, because we were having revenue shortfalls. And one of the big issues too at the same time was this decaying infrastructure was causing us problems because that was our tax base. And then the other issue too was we were having demographic changes too. We were having an aging population, and we were also having at the same time, we were having societal changes too, and that we were having ethnic and racial changes within the community. We were also having educational changes. So our whole demographics in the city were starting to change too. And we felt it was important to address these issues before they became problems. So those were really the issues and the era of change that were hitting us. And the biggest challenges were, and this is a statement that I would use, and I know that it's been picked up, but cities never stay the same. They either get better or they get worse. And so we wanted to make sure that we were getting better and not getting worse. And so one of the big things was that we felt that we couldn't address any of these issues without involving the community. Before you can address these issues, the community has to start to understand why they're problems. If the city council finally came to everybody and says, here's what we're going to do, without involving the community, it wouldn't have worked. And so that was very, very important for us. And fortunately, because as Mayor Shaw and Mayor Morton mentioned, we have been involved at a regional and a national level, And we had the advantage of bringing in, at the National League of Cities expense, a facilitator by the name of John Ott. And we formed a group called Democratic Governance, and we involved the community. And we brought in people that we knew were pro-city, we brought people in that were anti-city, and we brought in people that were ambivalent about the whole issue. And we had these discussions over a year's time. And in fact, there was a book that was written about what happened, and it was called The Next Form of Democracy. And it was a very interesting experience, and I can get into more detail on that a little later. But the bottom line is we started to get community buy-in on these issues that I just mentioned to you about that. And so I think that was the biggest thing that we felt that was important, is first of all, establish that base with the community and what we were trying to do.
Interesting, the continuity of answers from the first two Lindas and Steve. I also felt at the time of 2007 to 2015, I felt like it was a very transformational time for Lakewood. Belmar was continuing to be built out. The light rail was under construction and eventually opened, which was a very, very disruptive process. If you think about the fast track system, the West Corridor is the only line. I see Dave sitting in the back here, knows all about this, but Dave Ruckman over here. It was the only one of these lines that was being built through an established residential neighborhood, and that was difficult. We had the first two hospitals that were built in Lakewood, so it was a transformational time, and change is really hard for people, right? Really, really hard, and I felt like it was my job to. My campaign slogan when I first ran for mayor was moving Lakewood forward, and I believed that until the day that I left office. Just continued to try to nudge Lakewood in the direction at least I thought was appropriate. I didn't feel like, you heard Linda Morton talk about the Metro Mayor's Caucus. We were very well respected, very well involved in the region. I wanted to try to move us from this self-image of being a bedroom community to being a place where we could live, work, and play, right? So I was happy at one point during my term that we kind of went over this, that more people drove into Lakewood to work than drove out of Lakewood every morning to go to work someplace else. So that was kind of the biggest challenges. And I would say the hardest thing to me was something I finally learned in maybe my last year as mayor, that the job of the mayor is to be that agent of change, to be the change agent. And that's hard because most people inherently do not like change. It's our job to nudge the community forward.
Well, all these mayors fixed all the problems, so I've been on easy street, so there's nothing really to report. But to what Mayor Murphy said, we are actually adding 3 jobs to every residential unit, so there has been that success. Coming on in 2015, to look at where we're at today and try to predict that was something that I don't think I fully saw or was able to embrace, and that is we are an infill community. We don't have areas to grow. And as we've seen throughout the whole metro area, we're growing, right? And in the city of Lakewood, we're growing much different than we have in the past. In the past, you still had greenfield development. So throughout these folks' terms, growth was in different areas. You didn't always feel that impact. Well, that's changed a lot. And with the popularity of the metro area and infill development, those are 2 of the big challenges that we're facing in the city and that we really hear from people, and feeling this sense of crampedness or this sense of different kind of development. And so we've really been challenged with that for the last couple years. And I think a couple of other issues that have come through this growth period in Denver and especially in Lakewood is we've seen increased issues with homelessness in areas that we never saw before, and amongst our most vulnerable, our children in the community. Over 3,000 kids in just Jefferson County Public Schools alone identify as homeless in some way or another. And so being tasked with some of those tougher issues that maybe more urbanized cities have faced in the past, we're starting to see. And the other flip side to the growth that we're seeing is the affordability and how expensive it's become to live in the city of Lakewood. And when you're a community of 155,000, you have retail jobs, you have entry-level jobs, you have executive jobs, and you want to be able to have an environment where everybody can live, work, and play. And for some, it's becoming harder and harder to find that opportunity to live. You know, just trying to work minimum wage and afford to rent in Lakewood is really a thing of the past. So those are some of the most challenging issues I think that this council is dealing with currently. So,
Gotta get the red light showing. What is your biggest accomplishment if you haven't covered it already?
yeah. So certainly, you know, personally, becoming the mayor of this great community has been a tremendous honor and a great opportunity. And I think the greatest accomplishment for our community as a whole, twofold. One, in 2 years ago, we were able to preserve 60 acres of what was known as the Taylor property on Wadsworth and Morrison Road. And that is really important as far as a historic property, but an important property in a community that's really seeing a lot of growth. So that was a great win. That was really led by our city manager, and I'm really proud of that. And then just recently, this last November, the community said you can keep our Tabor refunds until 2025, and you can reinvest those dollars into parks, police, and open space. And prior to doing that, we'd refunded about $25 million. And so for the next 8 years, that's going to be some real meaningful dollars to help offset some of the issues and some of the things that we're seeing with growth in the development. So that was a great win by the community. Over 60% turned out to say yes, and we're very, very proud of that.
That's good. So when we talk about accomplishments, it's always tempting to talk about projects, you know, light rail and Belmar and that sort of thing, but I'm going to talk about two other things. The first is that I realized very early on when there was going to be a transition in city managers that what we do at the City of Lakewood is deliver services to you, right? So therefore, we are a people organization. And I think 3/4 of our budget goes in one way or another to personnel. So I think my biggest accomplishment was recognizing that it was our job to hire the best people, the best manager of people that we could to keep delivering the services to you. And I think we did that in Kathy Hodson. So that's, I think that's the thing I'm proudest of. The second thing was this guy here gave me an opportunity to kind of go out in the community and lead a little thing called a sales tax campaign in 2005. And we went from a 2% city to a 3% city, and we were close to turning out the lights. Remember that conversation? The street lights. But the voters agreed, and the rest is history. We have been on a very firm financial foundation ever since then. And I was in living rooms and ballrooms throughout the city for 9 or 10 months, and that was a fantastic and rewarding exercise.
And let me pick up on a common thread that you've heard from Jim Ritchie on, and it's a metaphor that I've used throughout the years. Some of us have the opportunity to cultivate the soil and get it ready. Others plant the seeds. Others nurture those seeds, and others harvest the seeds. And it's been that way, not just with the mayors, but with the councils. And it's kind of the culture of our city, of councils and of staff, that we think long term. And it's not, well, I want credit for that. It's we want to do something that's right for the city. And so that's the culture over the last 50 years of doing what's right for the community. And that's a culture we don't want to lose in this city. We want to make sure that we continue with that attitude of the character that Jim mentioned, and the ethics and the honesty and moving forward. And I know our council, when we went on the retreat, was we want to keep humor also in the organization, that you know, it doesn't hurt to laugh once in a while, and you may disagree with one another, but have fun in what you're doing. And so I know Mike Rock made a comment one time. He said, we seem to have a mayor seemed to have a tradition of long-term thinking, not who gets the credit. And I think that that's real important. As far as biggest accomplishments, I will say it is Belmar, because as Linda Morton said, that was handed to me, but she got it started. She brought Continuum Partners to the table. But you know what? It wasn't our council that had the courage to step out and build narrow streets and tear down their favorite mall. But think what would have happened if we'd have done that without involving the community. We formed a citizens community, and Mike Stevens of council chaired that, but we had some people that are in this audience that were on that committee. But one thing we did, we gave them cameras and had them go out and take pictures of developments they like and developments they didn't like. And nobody came back with strip malls. They came back with nice things that they liked throughout the community. But what I'm trying to say is the community was involved with what happened, and that's how Belmar came about. And we won't go into a lot of detail on that. But look at the jobs it created, look at the pride it created. We attracted the younger people to come to Lakewood, and which was good. You know, we don't want to have all of one particular type of age group, but it was good to bring in different people. So it set a trend. We had people from all over the world coming to see what was going on at Belmar, that mixed-use development. That, by the way, we couldn't get any financing because it was mixed use. It was out of the norm. So wanted to mention that. Internally, I think the biggest accomplishment is that our backs were up against the wall financially in the city of Lakewood. But instead of going out and coming up with a plan, as Bob said, we went out to the community and we asked the citizens, what type of city do you want? We can deliver you a 2% city sales tax city, or we can deliver you a 3% city sales tax city. Tell us what you want. We'll deliver either one. And the citizen said, we trust you to deliver a 3% sales tax city. But it didn't go that far. We went then to the staff and we said to the city, there's no empire building. One department doesn't get any more than the next. And as the money started flowing in, as Colorado Mills, as West Colfax started, as Belmar started, as we started to get this money, instead of people starting to build their departments, what happened, we started to build our reserves back up. And to this day, the city of Lakewood has some of the best reserves of any city in the United States, because the people trusted the city council and the city staff to do what was right. And they did what was right. And so I would say, again, as Bob said, maybe it's not necessarily the physical things, but it's those intrinsic things that really count. It's those long-term things.
Thank you. Well, we're going on 2 more questions. What was one of your greatest opportunities that you had as a mayor?
So I think on again, 2 answers. One is just the opportunity, as you heard from I think both Lindas, the opportunity to serve with so many fellow mayors on the Metro Mayor's Caucus, an extraordinary organization that works collaboratively in the region, along with the opportunity to work with an incredible staff at the City of Lakewood. The coolest thing personally I got to do was I was invited by Kim Day and Mayor Hancock to be part of the inaugural Dreamliner flight, the Denver to Tokyo route. And I was invited because of the presence of Terumo BCT, a Japanese-owned company, and up until recently our largest employer in Lakewood. So the opportunity to take that trip with lots of people and be part of these ceremonies linking Denver and Tokyo was really neat. Amazing opportunity.
Yeah, this was a tough one when you think about it, because this job has a lot of great opportunities and a lot of fun things that you're allowed the opportunity to partake in. And for me, we were awarded right after I was elected an All-America City Award. And it had been the second time that we had received that. And that was really cool to see the community come together and rally around what they thought made Lakewood an All-America City. And we got to go down and present the different aspects of our community. And we had little school kids and people from all different age groups talking about what made Lakewood a great community. And we were up against 100 communities from throughout the United States, and the city of Lakewood was one of 10 finalists that year to receive that, and it had been our second. So that was a really cool opportunity, and we still are very proud of that today.
I think the opportunity again to meet some really interesting people that very smart people, not only here but in Washington D.C., New York, around. From a fun point of view, getting the phone call by the Urban Land Institute, we'd like you to go to Cannes, France, and tell about Belmar. It'll be all expense paid, business class. I said, there's only one problem. My wife will want to go. I said, no problem. We'll pay our way if you're willing to go economy. I said, that's not a problem. They ended up with a better deal because it was cheaper for two people economy than one business class. So anyway, that was a great opportunity, and be able to present Belmar worldwide as to what we had done here in Lakewood.
Sounds like lots of wonderful opportunities. Last question. What is one funny thing that happened to you, not on the way to the forum, but when you were mayor? And Steve, you want to start?
Yeah. I wish Kathy Hodson were here this evening, because we almost didn't have a city manager because of something I did. We were in the process of renovating all of the rec centers, and just about fell out of her chair right now because she remembers this. So Kathy said, well, would you be willing to do something as the mayor and go to each of the rec centers and do something? And I said, well, of course. Mayors do those things, don't we? And so one, I had to climb a climbing wall, no problem. At the link, I had to dress up as a pirate captain. Then we went to Carmody, and I had to lift weights. But the worst one was going up to Green Mountain and having to go through an aerobics class. Now, I'm not very good at doing aerobics, and she was splitting and she was falling on the floor watching me doing aerobics. So that was probably one of the most embarrassing things I ever had to do as mayor.
So I'm going to draw two threads together, All America City and Kathy Hodson. I wish we had done this last week. Kathy would have been here. But we went to Kansas City in 2011 and competed in the All America City pageant. And I didn't use that word accidentally for the first time, because that's kind of what it was like. It was like a 3.5-day beauty pageant. You always had to be on, and the judges might be watching, and we were we were intense. There were 13 or 14 of us, kids from Boys and Girls Club and folks from around the community that were on this trip, and we felt a lot of pressure. I mean, we put a lot of work into this, and at one point, you sit in this big ballroom with 600 or 700 or 800 people, and there's, I don't know, 70 cities there, and they only give out 10 awards. So at one point, they announced the city of Lakewood as some small award that we didn't even know about. And Kathy and I turned to each other and said, "What are we, Miss Congeniality? Are we?" and eventually, like, we were 7th on the list. We got awarded All America City, and there was such a relief, okay, that we had to celebrate. And we were staying at the Hyatt in downtown Kansas City, and they had a bar on the top floor, and the bar had a piano, and the bar manager was like, "We're closed," and we're like, "No, you're not." So we kept that bar open for a long time with George Valek, if you all know George, playing piano, and Kathy singing show tunes, and we celebrated well into the night. So that's a lot of fun people on that trip. That was a great memory.
Well, again, we all have the opportunity to do fun and goofy things. When we have a mayor's show, I had the opportunity to go wakeboarding and went to the motorcycle track and tried my hand at riding around the motorcycle. But growing up in this great community, I was somewhat of a rebellious youth and made it known to the Lakewood Police Department that one day I'd be mayor, and they would be very sorry because they'd all have to drive Pintos, and with one big yellow light on top. So that was what I made reference to in one of my encounters. And when I got elected, I received an anonymous phone call from a Lakewood police agent who said, "We are so very proud of you and what you've done, but please do not make us drive Pintos."
I'd like to introduce Mary Wiley. She has some presentations to make. Mary's was the force behind tonight. It was her idea to help Lakewood celebrate its 50.
Oh, thank you. All right, Barb, absolutely. Here, we'll switch. Here, I'm hot.
It's okay. I got it, I think.
Okay.
It may not stay on. We'll try it. I wanted to recognize some other behind-the-scenes people from the city of Lakewood. For instance, Zach.
All right, Zach. There you go.
Zach Smith doing the videography, Jonathan Kirsch and Kit Lammers, who couldn't be here tonight, but they were setting up those out-of-town interviews and all of that extra work. And then two others, Mary Wiley, but also Steve Burkholder, who helped with all the coordination and making sure Arizona was in touch, and Linda Morton was in touch. So a lot of work had gotten done there. And many thanks to all of you for coming tonight, because we'd sure hate to not have anybody out there in the audience, and a lot of familiar faces. And if you want to save $5 on your books, you might go back to that table and do some pre-ordering. Thank you very much.